Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We'll just give everyone a moment or two for audio and so forth to connect, so we'll start in a very short moment. Okay, looks like I think we'll have pretty well everyone on, and we'll expect a few people to join as our session goes. So welcome again. My name's Norbert Michel. I'm the Executive Director with AfPA representing Victoria, Tasmania. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on where we meet today. Pay my respects to the elders, both past and present, and I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. Thank you for joining us today online and for our presenters also. On behalf of Anna D'Angelo, I'd just like to pass on her regards. Apologies, Anna wasn't able to be here today. If you joined into our first session, you would have seen Anna running there. I'm jumping in to help out. Today we've got three presenters. In order of their presentations, we will hear from John Wade, General Manager, Thin Surfacing, SA, NT and WA, representing Downer Transport and Infrastructure. Also online with us is Sylvain Clément, Business Improvement Manager, representing Inroads, Primal Surfacing and VSA Roads. And also online with us today is Mike Pickering, Director Pavements, Research and Innovation, representing the Department of Transport and Main Roads in Queensland. Before we start with the presentation, just some general housekeeping. I think everyone's really familiar with these, but I'll just go through them just quickly. We've got a 1 hour long webinar today. We've got three presentations, so it'll be about 15 minutes each, and then we'll have an opportunity for Q&A at the end of the sessions. So as the presentations are being delivered, feel free to use the chat function to type in your questions, and then we'll go through them. If you can, try and be specific in addressing it to the presenter you would like the question to go to. I believe most microphones will be turned off, but if by any chance yours is on, please turn it off just to avoid any background noise. And also confirming that our presentations and recording will be available on the AfPA website after the event shortly thereafter. For those of you who were not part of the first session of this series, just take a couple of seconds just to provide you with a quick overview of the purpose of these webinars. They've been prepared in consultation with the AfPA Surfacing Committee, and with that opportunity, I'd like to take the time now to thank them for their support in helping curate these sessions. The purpose of today's talk is about the current spray sealing practices and alternative techniques that may be available to using cutters in sprayed seals. Those of you who joined in, the first webinar provided you with an introduction on the topic, focusing on why we use cutters in construction of sprayed seals, as well as exploring the safety and environmental hazards, risks that are associated with their use. We also touched a little bit on the evolving practices. This second webinar will, as I said, focus on existing practices that are available across the industry to assist with reducing cutter use. And obviously you're interested in cutters, so you'll be joining into the third session. There'll be one last webinar in October where we'll share an update on some of the projects that are currently underway, as well as the current transition to the use of bitumen emulsions as an alternative to hot cutback bitumen in New Zealand. These webinars are underpinned by the AfPA, the developed AfPA strategy and roadmap in terms of the processes and opportunities to reduce cutter use across the industry. So if you're not too familiar with that, I encourage you to refer to that roadmap that's available on AfPA's website for more information. I'm sure you're all relatively familiar with our presenters, so I won't add much more to introduce them, apart from obviously taking the opportunity in advance now to thank them for their time in putting together these presentations and supporting the sharing of their knowledge across the industry. So with that, I will hand over to our first presenter, John Wade. John, over to you.
Thanks, Norbert, and obviously thanks to the other presenters as well for jumping on. Welcome everyone. Good morning and good afternoon, probably in different states, wherever you're dialing in from. So I'll just share my presentation. Tell me when you can see that, Norbert.
All good, John?
All right. Thanks. We'll get going. So yeah, I suppose representing Downer today on this presentation, and I suppose one of the key things I suppose for Downer is sustainability is one of the key pillars for Downer's purpose, and part of that's delivering sort of low carbon, sustainable pavement solutions to roads, airfields, and mining in the private sector. I suppose just some high level numbers to run through, and as we get through the rest of it. But at the moment in Australia, Downer's spraying sort of 35+ million litres per annum without any cutter. So it's pretty widespread already, and obviously there's lots of other solutions, and those things we'll cover off today about adding to that along the way. Part of that is we're going to talk about is crumb rubber in the first part of the discussion, and that's probably around the production of crumb rubber and essentially a lot of the new field blending techniques that have evolved over the last 4 or 5 years, and obviously in support with TSA and other partners. Tyre recycling, end of life tyres is a big part of the recycling to ensuring sustainability. So at the moment we're doing nearly 375,000 tyre end of life equivalent end of life passenger unit tyres. To the part of the rest of the presentation as we go, we'll talk about as we mentioned field blending and crumb rubber in the field, and also probably towards the end of the presentation, the discussion about other solutions that are available probably at scale already for some people may not know, and the combination of some of those treatments. So the first one we were going to talk about was production and field and I suppose the crumb rubber production, and part of that was, for most people know, plant blended as it's called. It's really normally from a fixed plant. It's normally a large fixed plant in a metropolitan area, normally with both low shear and high shear technology for blending crumb rubber. Nothing wrong with fixed plant blended plant rubber, any of those things. I think the opportunities are it's large scale, can be modified, large storing, high production capability, and probably a lot of control where you've got a large manufacturing process with all of those quality controls that you can put in place in a large fixed facility. I think the other one is some of the projects it's ideal for. It's really ideally suited for something that's within sort of suitable or specified haulage radius, and that varies around the country. But it's certainly ideal for those environments. I think one of the challenges that's come with crumb rubber and manufacturing, especially in remote places, has been most of our road network is sealed across the country, especially in rural areas, and obviously carting at long distances. There's obviously been challenges with the products basically settling into the tankers, into the lower part of the tankers, and that's normally where the heating's done. And obviously with having more crumb rubber towards the bottom of the tank, trying to reheat that product has remained a challenge over a long period of time. There's been some a big challenge if there's a change on the production run lead time. So if you've got a truck that leaves a metropolitan area travelling 1, 2, 3 day travel, changing the production of what the field needs or the product it needs is harder. And I suppose, one of the challenges that's been seen in sort of, the more concentrated crumb rubber is a product that may not be the same from what it was manufactured versus what it's sprayed. So again, the bottom of the tanks may have a higher concentration rate of crumb than what's in the top of the vessel when it turns up ready for discharge to the cruise. So one of the challenges that's come along with some of the long haul sort of crumb rubber for the field crews is, in the past they've probably added cutter to assist with the viscosity of some of that product at the start of some of the tanker discharge loads and those things, with trying to overcome that with it not being quite as consistent right through the load. Moving on to, moving on to field blended crumb rubber, and there's a few photos after this to run through on what it looks like. But I suppose, Down has introduced sort of high and low shear technology and some purpose-built handling equipment to produce high quality crumb in the field, and that's really taken off in the last 5 years. And big acknowledgement to TSA for a lot of support and helping bring some of that technology to the field to get more end of use tyres recycled. I think the new technology now, and it's in the market, is it's bringing that fixed production technology to the field, which is for the the mixing, shearing, digestion, storage, and obviously testing in the field to make sure getting the highest quality product you can in the field. Obviously, some of the advantages are products can be manufactured with limited storage times because you're making it on the run. It obviously can be modified on the run. It's out there, and you don't have some of those long storage heating costs that come with wasted energy over not having loads that have turned up on site that you don't know what to do with because it's either rained or there's been a breakdown or there's some unforeseen circumstance that's happened on a project. So as we talked about, was delays in the production can be managed in line with that. I think big difference is with the new technology, getting really consistent homogeneous blended binder conforming to sort of the S15, S18 RF specs now is very consistent, and the results that are coming through sort of prove the repeatability and the consistency of those. I think some of the other things that's sort of been experienced, and I'm talking about this at sort of large scale per annum, that with the product being so much more consistent and homogeneous, and obviously the viscosity being very, very consistent, crews don't have to put cutter in to enable that sort of uniform spraying. There's a reduced requirements for trying to heat binder above the spraying temperatures, which has been a challenge with some of the product in the past, and obviously spraying with some more standard nozzles. So there's some of the other benefits that have come along with some new technology, new process in the field. Just share a photo of, so this is from a project in WA in the Goldfields region. This unit I've just completed a project there over the last 2 seasons, and obviously travelled across and did a lot of work in South Australia. So it's one of the units that's floating around. This is one of the larger ones. The next photo is an aerial version of a smaller version setup, but it's all the things that you would have in a fixed plant, and the aerial view probably highlights and shows the sort of the processing on how it works roadside. So all the things you get with a pug mill, a shear mill, digestion tanks, a laboratory, all of those things that are on there. These units are running PLC control for flow control, temperature control, has all the other safety features you would get in a fixed plant with alarms and the likes. And the other unique thing with all of this is everything's done under suction, so there's no binder that's under pressure when it's being manufactured. It's all anything that's going from one location to another location's all under suction. Let me share the next slide. It's an aerial view of a roadside, a smaller version, but in roadside, and basically the vehicle on the left, this vehicle here is the raw road tanker turning up with straight run bitumen in it. From there, it's being transferred through into this vehicle here, which is basically mixing, digesting the raw crumb rubber with the bitumen. It's then being transferred into the high shear mill in this facility here. So it's passing this through in a single pass through the shear mill, and then it's going into a purpose-built digestion tank that's got all the controls on it for maintaining the product in a stable format. Once the product's released and passed, so a test is taken from there. It's then released and put into the road tankers to travel to site. So it's an aerial view, very mobile facility that can be moved around, and as I mentioned, that unit's travels around along with the others. I'll just touch base on to finish off with some of the other items that are available at scale across the country, and are widely used. And I still think there's some opportunities. Well, there is opportunities for improvements in all of these items, but sometimes a combination of them is probably where we'll get some of the bigger benefits as well along the way. So I think, which Norbert mentioned, the next session's about emulsions and the development of those. At the moment, there's widespread emulsion primes available. There's obviously high binder PME emulsions available, and pre-coats that are all emulsion based and are widely used across the regions. There's obviously micro surfacing, and I'll touch base on a few examples of what that can be done in combination with other treatments as well. One pass combination spreaders have been around for a while, but probably in the past has probably been used more in the maintenance activities, but the benefits of using some of those have now moved into the conventional spray seal market, and we're using a lot of those across multiple regions now, and there's lots of safety benefits, and there's some improvement benefits around stone retention and those things earlier on. So that's another solution that's in place. Delivery phasing for both construction and maintenance, I think for all of us, it's probably the one. It's one of the key ones around trying to, I suppose, optimise what we can get done in the most optimised seasonal part of the weather. And there's constraints with funding and construction and all of those things that we all have to face. But I think we need to realise that getting work in the optimised weather gives us the best chance of getting the right sustainable solution on the pavement. So that's something that I think is key for obviously all construction and all maintenance. The last one I was going to touch base on was around combined treatment solutions. There's lots of benefits and lots of challenges, I think, for probably especially new construction, probably some maintenance, but probably new construction around trying to put the right treatment on when the weather's cold, but in a month's time it's going to be today it's 10 or 15 degrees. In 4 weeks' time it's 45 degrees, and we've got heavy trucks that are going to be on that network. They're going to be stopping. The seal's going to be under some high stress. So some examples are using an emulsion based binder for the initial seal to get it down, which can be constructed in that, cooler weather, and then, in a month's time or 2 months' time, applying a high stress crumb rubber seal, or in an extreme stress, putting a microbe over the top of it. In some of those, treatments, again, having a cracked high stress seal on an acceleration lane that needs maintenance, putting an emulsion seal down and then putting a microbe over the top, maybe another option. So a combination of some of the treatments, I think, are some benefits for all of us to consider. So I suppose I was keen to share what was available in the crumb space, but what's already available out there, and there's sort of more work to be done in that space, and there's a lot of work still being done in the background on all of those treatments. So that was it for me. Thanks everyone again. And if you've got any questions, reach out. I'm happy that you reach out directly to myself outside of this, or to the RPQ guys, and I'll hand over to Sylvain. Thank you for that.
No worries. Thank you, John. I'm going to share my screen. That should have come through. Let me know if you can see and hear me.
All good.
All good. No worries. So yeah, thanks John. Thanks AfPA and Norbert for giving me the opportunity to present today. So my name is Sylvain Clément. I work for VSA Road, which groups primal surfacing and inroads to spray sealing entity operating mainly in Victoria, South Australia and New South Wales. So today I'm going to present on reduction of cutters, our strategy that we've put in place using combination sprayers and spreaders, as well as using a low viscosity crumb rubber bitumen. So I'm going to so first, background and challenges of reducing the amount of cutter we're using. Just a bit of context on this. I'm going to talk from a southern states point of view. So Victoria, we tend to use more cutter in percentage than the rest of Australia. So keep that in mind when I'm talking through the slides. So I'm going to introduce our solution that we've put together, and then give you 3 concrete job sites that we've completed in the past years, before giving you some stats and some conclusion on where we're at with our project. So to start with, and we already touched up on this during the first webinar on why we use cutter and then what are the risks associated. So I'm just going to be quick by just showing you the first major hazards in terms of when we use cutter. On the right hand side here, you're going to see a video of what happens when things go wrong. So a cutback bitumen is a mixture of a solvent which got a flash point of 70 degrees, which is introduced into a bitumen, which is handled at 200 degrees, way above the flash point of the mixture. And therefore, as soon as you've got an ignition source, vapors can and will ignite, as you can see on the video here. Now, it's worth pointing that even without cutter, hot bitumen can itself ignite when it's heated at really extremely high temperatures. But obviously, the more cutter there is in the binder, the more likely the ignition is. So obviously, that kind of video is not something that happens every day, every week, or even every year. But I'd be curious to do a bit of a show of hand in the group here today amongst spray sealing practitioners. I'm pretty sure that everyone would have heard of at least an incident during their career involving ignitions of vapors due to cutback bitumen. So it doesn't happen often, yes, but when it does, the consequence can be major. So in terms of a risk matrix, we're sitting in a high category, meaning we have to be looking at better ways to do things. Besides vapors ignition, there is also a risk of exposing workers to severe burns if the product goes sideways, and as well as fume exposure, which we touched about in the first webinar. To handle cutback bitumen, so cutback bitumen is a class 3 dangerous goods, and with that comes a whole suite of requirements in terms of operators training, in terms of equipment that needs to be built in a certain way and maintained to that specification, and also a whole bunch of procedures which has to be implemented on site to make sure there is no ignition source. which when you think about it on a live job site with cars driving through when we're working in an urban environment, is not always necessarily practical. The photo below shows you the kind of emission of fumes that can result as a result of using cutback bitumen. You can see emission of VOCs as well as greenhouse gas emission. And then just finally on that topic, the feedback we've been getting from overseas, we've been talking to a lot of Americans, Europeans over the journey to understand how they do spray seals. And whenever we tell them that we're still doing cutback bitumen in Australia, everyone looks at us in shock and disbelief because they've banned those practices a long time ago. So in a way, in Australia, we are a bit behind the rest of the developed world in that regard. So what we've done at Colas and VSA in terms of, we've set ourselves an internal target, which is having the amount of cutter we use in our spray sealing in a period of 5 years. So how are we going to do that? How we've been doing that? So a bit of a recap of why we use cutter. It's to reduce the viscosity of the bitumen so that it sprays and fans properly through the spray bar. And then once it's on the ground, the aggregate needs to be able to stick to it. So typically we do it with cutback bitumen, but we can also, to reduce the viscosity, instead of adding cutter, we can simply emulsify the bitumen and then use what's called bitumen emulsion, which is widely used, but come with its own limitations. It's not a topic of today's presentation, so I'll just skip that one for now to talk about what the direction we've chosen to go. Which is using a low viscosity hot crumb rubber bitumen. So 5 years ago now, we've approached our bitumen supplier, Sami Bitumen Technologies, and they did a whole lot of R&D in the lab to come up with a low viscosity formula, which still meets all the S15R specification, torsional recovery, softening point. All of that is exactly the same. It just behaves differently in the spray bar. So we're using that product, but spraying the product is only half of the jigsaw puzzle. You also need to get the aggregate to stick to that product. So on the right-hand side, you can see here some measurements we have done when you can see the temperature of the binder as soon as it's been sprayed on the pavement. And what we've noticed, and we're very surprised at the time, that within half a minute, the binder reaches the pavement temperature, which again in Victoria, it might not be as bad in Northern Australia, but in Victoria, that typically is below the softening point of the binder, meaning the aggregate is not going to be able to, the binder is not going to be able to wet the aggregate as much as we want to. So to go around this issue, the only way for us without putting any cutter was to be able to drop the aggregate into the bitumen within pretty much the first second of application. And so I'm just going to show you a slow motion video of what we've been doing using combination sprayers. So you can see as soon as the bitumen hits the ground, the aggregate shortly follow, and you get this instant of the aggregate into the bitumen. Obviously, then we need to make sure we've got the rollers behind, close, to make sure that adhesion is perfect. Next. It's bugging. Oh, what is happening? Oh, thank you, Microsoft. Sorry, just a sec. I'm gonna restart it. And all right, can you still see the screen? Yep. All right, good. Sorry about that. So the next step for us, because at the same time as we're trying to reduce the amount of cutter we use in our bitumen, our Victorian State Road Authority put a challenge to the industry to stop the practice of reverse spreading aggregates in spray sealing operations. So we had a 5-year transition period when we had to come up with a new way to do so. So we decided to have a bit of a holistic approach, looking at our spray sealing crews. What you can see on the screen is a typical spray sealing crew, and we've highlighted all the hazards and potential issues around our current practice. So on the top left of the screen, you can see you've got a tipper reversing with a hoist up in the air, which can be an issue, obviously, if you come close to power lines or even trees along the roadside. This tipper is reversing at moderate speed, and you can see you've got an operator on foot walking near it, which is not ideal. Down on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the sprayers down the road spraying that flammable cutback bitumen, as I mentioned before, as well as the fume partially obstructing the view of the vehicle on the job sites. You can also see some exposed bitumen, so in the full width in between the sprayer and the tipper, but also alongside of the tipper, because typically tippers are not able to cover the same width as what we can spray with our sprayers. So as a result, you've got 2 to 3 reversing tippers straddling down the road to cover that full width, which means you've got your bitumen sitting there for various period of time with different cooling temperature by the time the aggregate gets there. The exposed bitumen as well can be an issue if you happen to have any wildlife flying into or walking through the bitumen. Doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's a very difficult situation for the crew to manage. Also, when we reverse aggregates, when we reverse spread aggregates, typically we have to spread the aggregate heavier to ensure that the tires don't come into contact with the bitumen. And so typically we end up with some loose aggregates, which can be a hazard for the traveling public until the road is fully swept. So this is, we identified all of that and we thought, what can we do about it? This is a solution we came up with. So this equipment is called an OB Vario. This is a combination spraying and spreading units, which holds hot crumb rubber bitumen, in which we haven't put any cutter, some aggregates, a conveyor at the back to be able to self-load on the job sites, and a telescopic spray bar and aggregate spreader box. And going around the photo again, we can see that most of the hazards previously identified have been reduced, if not eliminated. So we don't have any more hoist. We're going in a forward-moving direction at a slow speed. There's not as many people around the equipment that needs to be there, so you decrease the risk of interaction. Exposed bitumen is no longer there. There's just a small strip between the spray bar and an aggregate spreading bar of bitumen exposed, but otherwise we cover as wide as we spray. The bitumen, as I just mentioned, is non-flammable, which you can see as a result, much less fuming coming through the sprayer. And we have also noticed that because we're spreading in a forward direction, and there's about a 25% reduction in aggregates spread rates, meaning our brooms at the end of the job are removing much less loose aggregates and we're wasting much less. Now I'm going to show you 3 examples of a job we've done in the past with those machines. So that first one was back in 2021, our first high-profile job on the very high traffic volume freeway, the Western Freeway, just outside of Horsham. We had to do the slow lane where there's a lot of heavy vehicle typically on it. So it was very important for us to be able to complete that job without using any cutter, because that way the softening point wouldn't be affected over time, and the risk of flushing would be really minimum. So we've used our OB Varios and to do Geofabrics 14.7, 10 parts rubber, no cutter, and a few action shots there. And then I've taken this photo last month, so just look only at the slow line. With a great texture and overall aggregate retention. Another type of job, completely different now, with very low traffic counts, outback Australia at the border of New South Wales and Queensland in a small town called Tibooburra. We did this at the start of last sealing season for transport from New South Wales. It was a single coat, SAM 10 with crumb rubber again, and without any cutter. I've got a video, and I hope it's not going to crash again as a result. So we took that video because that fence is the border between Queensland and New South Wales. So we're spraying in two Australian states at the same time with those two machines, which we thought was really cool. We didn't have to do the job this way, but it was just for the video. I also mentioned wildlife coming through job sites. You can see we had an emu visiting the job sites, and thankfully there was no exposed bitumen at the time, and we didn't have to try to get him off just all stuck in hot bitumen. On this job, the aggregate had to come from nearly 1,000 kilometers. So I mentioned 25% saving earlier. You can see how, in terms of cost saving and carbon emission as a result, savings as well. Finally, a third type of work we've been doing in South Australia. So toward the end of the seeding season for DIT, we've been able to tackle jobs which, with our typical conventional spray seeding crew, we would not have been able to. End of April, when temperatures start being too low to do crumb rubber bitumen. So typically you want 20 degrees and rising when you do crumb rubber bitumen. But what we've noticed is with our equipment, we are able to go as low as 10 degrees and rising and still get a good adhesion between the stone and the bitumen. So that was a two-coat seal. This one, you can see on the top right of the screen as well the traffic management that we're putting in place with our equipment, which is with the boom gates to remove the traffic controllers from the way of arm, as well as a pilot vehicle who's going to escort the traffic through the job and make sure cars slow right down when they get close to the operators and people working on the ground. A photo on the left-hand side is so this job site before, during, and after on the right-hand side. We've done some sand patch tests at the start of the season, and just everything come up in specs. Very happy with the results. In total, this is what we've done for the past 5 years now with our 3 OB varios. We estimate that we spray sealed 14 million square meters without using any cutter. We've used about 30 million liters to do so. Again, in a Victorian cold state and a context, that represents about 1.5 million liters of cutter saved. So you can imagine the greenhouse gas emission savings resulting from these savings. We are still using crumb rubber bitumen. So we estimate about 750,000 tires were saved from going to landfill whilst completing this work. And a 25% aggregate spread rate saving is about 40,000 tonnes that we've saved using those equipments. And obviously, when you save the aggregates, you save the pre-coat you put around, so an additional 300,000 litres of pre-coat saved. Just to finish up a couple of slides, just to show the correlation between so the evolution of how many squares we've been able to cover over the past years in a forward direction without using any cutter on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side is, at the end of the season, we crunch all the numbers, how many liters of cutter have we procured, divided by how many liters of binder have we spread. And we monitor our cutter usage binder. And our target is to get to the green bar there, the 2024 level. And last measurements of 2023, we were getting close to it. So far, it's heading in the right direction. So in conclusion, thanks to our combination sprayers, we've been able to eliminate the use of cutter and while still spraying hot crumb rubber bitumen, thanks to SAMI low viscosity S15R. What we haven't done is compromising the performance of our spray seals. Even though we're not using any cutter, obviously we're very nervous at the beginning, because in Victoria, when you do spray seals, you can use 4-6 parts of cutter in your spray seal, and when you go from that to 0, you're nervous. But in the 5 years of using this equipment, we haven't had any rework to worry about. The productivity also, we never tried to achieve any more than a spray sealing crew. We were just trying to replicate, and we are able to do that. So that means the square meter rates doesn't need to go up as a result. Overall, safer and more sustainable outcome. And I guess the only downside right now is that there hasn't been much, if any, spray sealing works going on last year and in this coming year on the Victorian main road network, meaning that all those assets are not currently fully occupied. So a bit of a shameless plug here, but if anyone has got any interest, please let me know. And just to finish up, so now that we've reduced the amount of cutter we're using, the next thing we're going to look at is the amount of pre-coat we're using around the aggregates. Because same theory, the aggregate is hitting the binder straight away. So we are thinking that we may not need to pre-coat it as much as we currently do, and therefore saving on a lot of hydrocarbon pre-coat oil being used. So that's it for me. Yeah.